Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and today we're going to take a look at the new NZXT H7 Flow RGB. Now there's been a few iterations of this, so the last one come out in 2022 and this one is kind of a progression because the old one did have a normal power supply cover that went right the way along the front, and it was actually a fair bit smaller as well. It was shorter and there was less room, sort of like there was less length there as well. With this one they have gone about things slightly differently, and I do want to kind of explain why. Now you can get the non-RGB version for $119.99, and this RGB version, which comes with the extra single piece fan in the front, it's a 360mm fan, but it is a single piece, although it is separate to the other two that I have fitted. So the other two that I have fitted in the bottom and in the top are the ones that are available separately, and it's the F360 RGB core. This one in the fan front is slightly different, and I'll explain why in a bit more detail later. But it looks slightly different because you can see that you've got this big area kind of unused at the bottom, and that is because when we flip the back of the case round, you can see that what they've done is basically vertically mounted the power supply. Now the reason why they've done this is predominantly so that we can have a 420mm front radiator mount up here. But what they've also done with this is technically you can put your hand underneath the lower fan. So this is all intake area, but what this does mean is when we get round to the back, and I am skirting round it because I will cover things in more detail, it means there's a lot of less wasted room in the back, because pretty much here on the other side is where those fans are, with the big gap underneath. So this area that you can see here is the only area of the case that goes down to the actual bottom. So they've used the space really carefully, because this is a really good place for us to see what's going on. This here is all underneath the case, that is airflow going in the bottom. This is the only bit that they're using in the back. So by doing this, they've minimized the amount of wasted space that they had. So it's got a smaller footprint than a dual chamber case, but it's kind of technically dual chamber. It's a little bit taller because they have elongated it for this 420mm mount in the front. So the only way they could have made this case smaller would have been if they'd brought everything upwards, but then you're kind of into the H sort of 5. And if they'd made the top bigger, then you would have been into the H9. So it does kind of make sense, and it is quite clever in how they've done it, although it is a little bit not what we're used to, we'll say. But I've got some ideas of what you can use this for to make it look less blank and less not used. But we'll crack in, have a look at the review itself. We've got some really interesting thermals, including me tweaking the way that the fans were used to make the best of this layout, and also me advising you on what may be the best possible thing for you to be running at home as well. But yes, we need to crack on with the main review. Please remember to like, subscribe and comment underneath. Do the ticks, do the likes, all that sort of stuff. Comment, let me know what you think as we're going along through the video, and let's get cracking. Now we always start at the front and at the top. So this is our I/O area. You've got your power switch, no reset, combined headphone microphone, USB-C, 2 USB-As. Love the little purple detail with the USB-As. Now if we come right the way around the back, we can remove the top plate in its entirety with a little bit of meshing. Now what you can see up here is room for a 360mm rad. You can fit a 360mm radiator up here as well. The depth is really going to be dependent on your motherboard and how it's laid out, but you're going to be able to get probably a 40, 45 above the motherboard, easy. Definitely a 30, easy peasy. You can get 3 140mm fans up here, just but you're not going to be able to fit a radiator in because of the end tanks. So it's 360 rad at the top, 360 rad at the bottom, and 360 rad in the front. But you can fit 420 rad in the front if you wanted to. Putting the cover back on, swinging round to the front. We've already pulled the front panel off. There is no extra dust filtering in the front at all. It is just the fine metal mesh. With the front, as I have already said, 360mm rad or a 420 and all of the other smaller iterations below it. But I didn't show you that you can pull out the front panel or the rad mount or the fan mount, whatever you want to call it, completely to aid installation when you are fitting your rads and maybe your AIOs or your fans, whatever. Now the fan that is in there, as I have said, it is slightly different to the other fans. Now this one is a DC fan, so it's only got a 3-pin header on it. I haven't been able to get it to go below 1300 RPM. In CAM software, you literally get to 1300 and it stops, and it doesn't matter. You keep dropping the percentage, dropping the percentage, dropping the percentage until you get to 0, then it goes off. Bring it back up to 1% or 5%, it goes straight to 1300 RPM. It is just where this fan wants to run. I find the RPMs available of this, which is 1300 to 1700, very restrictive, and I do wish it went down to something like 800 just so that you could lower it that little bit. I don't like being forced that 1300 is the lowest I can have my fans. It just feels a bit wrong. Now that is the fan that the RGB comes with. I'd probably say don't buy the RGB, but it's going to be completely down to you, your budget, and what you're expecting to get from it. I have fitted behind this lovely clear glass window. Basically, when I say clear glass, is it hasn't got a tint on it. It does have the white tips around it. It's lovely. Now I do have the F360 RGB core in the bottom and in the top, but as you'll see later on, I actually did end up turning the roof one off to test the air cooler because it worked better. But in this large open section, you can see that we have a cable grommet down the side. It is a cover. It does allow us to cover the 24 pin up slightly nicer, and then the PCI Express one, which if we were going super tidy, we'd be able to tuck that in more. The fan in the roof though does cover up a little bit the cables. Oh no, actually it's not the fan, there is a tab there. I do wish this was a bit bigger though. This section here, I do wish it came down a lot closer to the motherboard so it completely covered it, because there's no reason why it couldn't. In reality, you'd still be able to get the cables through and it would tidy everything up. In the back, there's a 120mm fan fitted, and it is the F120 core. NZXT sent me the extras to fill it up because when you buy the case, it doesn't come with anything in the bottom, the top, or the back. So it was just to give us a full sweep so that we could cover everything. But one of the things I did say to you about was this kind of section here, and we will talk about what we can do with that after we have covered around the back, because in reality it's quite easy. I have said to you that in the lower section, this is the only bit of the case that goes down to the floor. It's probably like 3 and a bit inches maybe, do you know what I mean? It's not a great deal. It is just this section for the power supply, and it just helps us. It's just this bit here. That's all that goes down to the bottom of the case. All this area up here starts up here from where the fans are. You do get a hard drive mount over on this side, but as you can see, it is a 2.5 inch hard drive mount. There isn't a 3.5 inch mount in here at all, so that's just for you to hide a couple of 2.5 inch SSDs or mechanicals if that's your flavour. There we go, in she goes. And that's the only bit there. You can see we have grommets up the side though. Here for the front I/O, you can obviously pin other stuff in there as well, but there are more grommets over here. There's loads of sturdy points for you to clip your cables round, and that's why I hadn't done it, as I wanted to show you that you can just clip your cables up here. There's more tabs up here, like little Velcro tabs, and there's routing channels down the side as well, because you can remove this cover for the back of the motherboard there, where the back plate is. Now this can pull off. You can see there are mounts up here for 3.5-inch hard drives up here if you want, and normal SSDs. So there's a couple of slots there. I happen to have my magnetic RGB controller up here. This is what NZXT sent me to control the RGB for the fans, because the case itself doesn't have anything to be able to control the fans with. So if you're going to be getting the case, you want to go full RGB, then you're going to need to think about a controller. You're going to need to think about your ecosystem as well, because this is NZXT cam. But anyway, that is stuck on that back plate there. There are lots of tabs and latches all over the place for you to be able to clip your cables to. You'll be able to do a much better job than me, but you're going to be building it for a long time, rather than me, where I'm building it to take it apart again. So the other side of it is, if I'm honest, if I remove all these RGB cables, there's next to nothing in the case, and it makes life quite easy. Adding in all of this makes life quite difficult, and you do really need to think about it. Also, I couldn't get it to go in the bottom out the way, and it was bothering me. So then, rather than me just be, well, I'm already continually moaning about it, but I've just hidden it. Now with the mesh down the side, I will say it's nice that it is a single strip, so that side of it is aesthetically pleasing, but then you can see everything that's going on here. So I do wish that it was only the power supply upwards for the mesh, because I didn't really see the point in it being right the way up. Now for the back, lots of lovely meshing, lots of lovely airflow. The design for the meshing is carried on into the actual I/O slots, and I really like that. When you take the I/O slots out as well, there's no tabs in between, so it aids us with vertically mounting graphics cards. Now, vertically mounting graphics cards, it's easy, there's loads of room, there's going to be direct airflow from the bottom, that's lovely, but we may see the return of multiple graphics cards if you're going to be running stuff that's going to be heavy on AI. If you are, don't think you're going to be like gaming very much, but technically you could run a vertical there, and you could get away with another one down here if you wanted to as well, but that's going to be a very limited amount of view. So this kind of dead zone, lots of room for big fat radiators, lots of room for multiple stack fans, so you could have push-pull and a thick radiator down here if you wanted, easy peasy. Fair amount of room up here as well for if you wanted to mount a tubular reservoir, but I'm going to assume that if you're going to end up with water cooling, that you're probably going to have a rad in the bottom, maybe a rad in the top, and I'd probably end up putting a reservoir in the front, because you're not necessarily going to need the airflow blowing front in then anyway. But simple things for at home. You could have one of those desktop screens put in here, stuck on this bit with your gauges to show your temperatures and stuff that's going on inside the case. That's a really easy thing to put here, really easy. You've pretty much got a little shelf here to put little models or little cars and stuff on. Same with down here on the fans, if I'm honest. You could turn the round backs to the fans, if you don't shove your finger in them like I did, into little stages or plinths to put models and things on. So this, I'm going to say, is going to be an area for you to get creative with and grow into. You could have little plants in there, little figurines. Like this. This is basically, if it bothers you that it's empty and dead space, then fill it up, make it a place for you. You could even have this as a nativity scene and just have it in the bottom. You get the kind of thing that I'm saying. It's going to be down to you. Same with at the back. You could have a little screen at the back if you wanted, because this is probably going to be just as easily visible as the side would be when you sat behind it. So there's lots of places for you to do those sort of things. The only thing I wish NZXT had done, and if I tip the case over, and that is, we can see down the bottom, as I move the camera down because I'm a professional, you can see that you've got the rubber mount, so you can put individual 120s down here as well as this single frame 360. but I do wish they'd put a little pass-through in here somewhere, a little grommet, just to get through into the back of the case, because then I would personally say this is ripe for you to put an RGB strip across. So if you had an RGB strip in here, which technically when you stand the case up you can no longer see, you could have this section down here with a lovely bit of underglow. But now if we want to do it, we have to drill the case. And I think a tiny little grommet would have been such a small addition to this, and easily then have been able to have run an NZXT strip that wide into cam would have been lovely. This could have been lit up so nice. Almost we need like an Elite Pro or something now with extra fans and this in, but that one grommet is the one thing on this case that I think NZXT have really missed a trick on. Inside, as I've said, lots of grommets. You can see that there's pass-throughs down into the power supply chamber. There's pass-throughs down the side that are covered and pass-throughs at the top. Lots of radiator connectivity. There is lots of connectivity and just space for activities. But when we come on to cooling, when we did do the initial test, which is exactly how we always do everything, this CPU cooler is wired in 9 volt to a SATA with a little resistor on it, and that's so that the fan never changes speed. Same with the graphics card, that's set to 60%. The only fan changes we make are the case ones. So we test at 1000, we test at 1500, we test at maximum. Sometimes we do 600 too, but we obviously haven't been able to change this, and it was basically 1300 or maximum, which is 1700. So we did do a 1000 RPM test with that, which technically the front is spinning too fast, but we did it anyway, and then we did a max. Now, the lower fan, bringing the air in, does favour the graphics card. With an air cooler, the top fan basically steals the air from the air cooler, and it confuses things. So what I'm going to say is, I know this is very rare, but bear with me. If you run an air cooler, you don't need the 360 in the roof. You just need another 120 at the back. And that is optimal airflow then for an air cooler. But most of you are going to run an AIO. So it doesn't matter at that point because you haven't got a air cooler. The point is mute. But having the 360 in the roof does help with graphics card temps, especially open frame graphics cards, which most are nowadays. So it kind of swings in roundabouts. Effectively, if you run an AIO, get all the airflow in there that you can do and then tune your fan profiles accordingly. But what we did end up doing was, if you have a look in the graph, there's a couple for 1000 RPM for the CPU, and I turned the roof fan off, so that whole 360, turned it off, and the CPU temperatures dropped by 2 degrees. Now that's not because the fan or the case is wrong, it's just to optimize the layout depending on what you're doing. So if you think about the air comes in the bottom and then you've got all of this sucking out as well, most of the air is going to end up coming up here and round, and there's just going to be a weird vortex going on in here where the CPU is not going to be getting the airflow that it wants. So by removing that roof fan, then the airflow is going in and out, it's much smoother, temperatures drop by a whole 2 degrees. And if I'm honest, if I'd put a 120 in the roof then, I think we probably might have dropped it by another 1.5, maybe 2 degrees again, just because of being able to get all that hot air out cleaner. But as I've said, if you have an AIO, you don't need to worry. And if at that point, if I'm honest, at that point, if you have an AIO, the point in the front fan does become more or less like, it doesn't need to be running at 1300 RPM. You could run it much lower because it'll be nice and clean to have in the bottom, out the top, lovely jubbly. So, deep breaths. It's a very pretty case. And once you understand why the power supply is vertical, and that is so that there's not much lost room, and the fact that they want to get a 420 in the front, you can kind of understand it. But pardon me, I do beg your pardon. But it does mean that it's kind of confusing because NZXT don't have a 420mm AIO. Maybe there's one coming. I can not necessarily confirm, but it's not imminent. So don't go thinking that next month there will be one. I'm not even sure whether you'll see one this year. But do I think they should have one? Yes. Do I think it shouldn't be Acetec? Yes. But we will see what happens. I know there are new AIOs coming. They're going to be cool. Seen those. They look nice. Probably said too much. Not going to say any more. Didn't see a 420 though. Anyway, right. So, lovely case. Very aggressive price point. It's a big case for £120. And I have to say that if you were going to push me, should I pay the extra £20 for the front fan? Which is basically what it is. If you're going to buy that fan in the bottom and that fan in the roof as well, I'm going to say don't buy the front one. Buy a matching one for the roof and the bottom if you want a full suite. If you've got an AIO and you are going full ham and you're going to buy loads of them, I definitely wouldn't buy that extra one. But if you're buying it as a budget case that you're not going to fill up with AIOs and you are going to have an air cooler and like some other mismatched fans in, then yeah, for the £20 it is going to be worth grabbing so that you've got it. But the RPM range being 1300 to 1700 I just find a bit limiting. But maybe you just want to fit it, forget about it, put your gaming stuff in there and then have done with it, then it might serve you well. So, very nice case. I'm going to give it the OC3D approved award because it's a very tasty case and it isn't massively expensive and it does exactly what it says on the tin. You're just going to need to get creative with your area down here, and I think if you are going full RGB, full NZXT, full intercam, put an RGB down here, like I said. Get a drill out before you build the case, put a hole through, get underneath here lit, and it will be mint. Because in reality, this bit under here probably is the only thing that NZXT missed out on with the design of this case.